Do you sometimes wonder how you could truly have an impact when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? How do you know you are moving in the right direction when it comes to becoming a more inclusive individual? As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod brings topics such as ethnicity, genders, sexuality, religion on the table. We talk about research and science, but also emotions, feelings, and vulnerability. We discuss allyship, advocacy, privilege, but most importantly, we talk action. Because without action, we stay still. And when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, stillness is never the answer. Welcome to As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Tracee Lydia Garner is an international best-selling author of 14 books, speaker, writing coach, and dynamic course creator. She writes fiction and nonfiction depicting African Americans triumphing over adversity and meeting success, whether that be in love or life pursuits. Tracee loves public speaking, teaching workshops, and talking about the craft of writing at every opportunity. She's the creator of Garner Solutions LLC, coaching new and aspiring writers through finishing the book and publishing process, as well as helping people with disabilities reach their independent living goals. Tracee holds a Bachelor of Science in Communications and resides outside the DC metropolitan area with her family. I am delighted to welcome Tracee in this latest episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Welcome to another episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. I have the great pleasure to welcome an amazing guest today, Tracee. Tracee, welcome to this episode.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm very happy as well to have you here and really looking forward to our conversation. I mean, you have such interesting story and things to share as well. I can't wait to dive into that. But I'll start with my usual question, which is, Tracee, what's your story?
Yeah, my story is that I am an African-American woman who uses a wheelchair. I have a mobility disability, a physical disability called muscular dystrophy. And I'm over here in the United States from the Washington, D.C. area. I live in Virginia. And I'm just an advocate and a person who cares about people. I love people, but also have a heart and a mind and an advocacy muscle for people with disabilities. And I am been traveling and talking to lots of different people, trying to bring awareness about our experiences and trying to increase inclusive practices for the groups of people that I represent and serve.
And what I love about your story as well is there is, and we will talk obviously about disability and ableism and all these topics around that, but even more, there is a very strong intersection as well with, you mentioned being African American, being a woman. So I think I'm sure there are different elements there as well that throughout your life have come into how do you create that inclusion and that diversity and that belonging, and for yourself, but as well for people in similar communities as you.
Definitely. It's an ongoing battle. It's a daily struggle. And it's honestly, it can be quite exhausting sometimes to carry all of the labels that people put on you. But, you know, that's my life. I've learned to deal with it and, you know, use it at times to my advantage. And then at other times, just to change people's minds about things, to try to get away from labels and in hopes that we can really all relate to each other as human beings. and at the same time, consider people's experience, consider people's differences, because they are such a huge part of everything that that person has to offer. When you bring yourself to something, you bring your total self. So I'm bringing Black, I'm bringing disability, I'm bringing gender, I'm even bringing a little overweightness that we all have sometimes. And so all of those things, are really who you are, and they are going to impact your experience in life, and then they're going to impact how other people experience you and how other people perceive you. And so it's just so important that even though we're all different, that we not negate those differences, and that we not try to put them away. And when people say, I don't see this, I don't see color, I don't see disability, well, you really, you kind of erase that all that person went through in order to deal with the things that make up who they are. So, all of that is still important. It's still relevant, and it makes you uniquely you. Those things are so important to you.
And it is a very important thing indeed to be uniquely you. Ultimately, we all are, but we should not be suffering because of that. And you're right.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges that that you dealt with throughout your story and your life.
Yeah, most of my challenges really come from people and attitudinal barriers. A lot of people think that the barriers that people face are access and physical buildings, lack of ramps, lack of ways to get in, ways to take part in the things, lack of ways to travel. But it really comes down to attitudinal barriers, because people in a position to build things and to make them accessible to you, they first have to have a mindset that says, wow, I should be pretty open. I should find ways to include more people instead of building everything with steps, building everything with heavy doors. That is really a narrow view of who's participating in our world. And so I think that I first need the builder, the person who designs the building, the architecture. I really need them to think about a wider base of users, of end users that come to their establishments, that want to go and see their beautiful temples and all of these things. So they need to first be more open to, who is this for? Do I only want able-bodied people? Do I only want white men to come? What am I really saying when I first can't even think outside the box and think about, I'm going to make this door, is as light as a feather. I'll use materials, and I'll use, different tools that will cut down on the weight of something so that someone can exit and enter freely. Older people, young people, people using wheelchairs, mothers with strollers, and if we all could relate to that, we all could think about that, like, this isn't just for me. When I go up a ramp, I just think, oh, here's my personal ramp. Yay, me. There's the delivery man that came. He had a bunch of packages. There's the mom that had the strollers. There's the pregnant woman. There's a mother, middle-aged woman who's pushing her elderly father or mother up the ramp. Everything that we people with disabilities have come to need and to use gets used by everybody. They're like, wow, this is nice. How convenient. And, imagine if we said, no, you can't use that because you're not disabled. People will be like, what? I could use anything I want to, but then we don't have that luxury. So we confront so many barriers just in life, getting to school, going to my classes. In school, my books were so heavy, I couldn't carry them. So I would have a set of books in the class that my teacher kept for me. And then I would have a set of books at home. And then people automatically thought I had some kind of special treatment, or I was extra smart because I didn't need to carry my books around. And it was like, that's so silly. Like, why can't you think deeper? Like, maybe it's hard to carry them. Maybe, it's just too much trouble. And so we're also going around penalizing people for the things that they need, when we should just think, wow, we should do that for everybody. Maybe the kids wouldn't lose their books if they all were here, kept at the classroom. Maybe they wouldn't get as damaged and were able to use them for a longer period of time instead of people taking them back and forth. Maybe we should put more books on computer so that people can just access them anywhere. So all of these things that we have thought about for people with disabilities have really impacted the entire world and made it that much more accessible to everyone, disabled or not. And so my life has been, just a series of different barriers to confront, things to figure out, and attitudes and mind shifts to try to put on people to help them see, no, that's not, that's not inclusive, or that's not the way. And everything that has come about as a result of our being here has enhanced, the world for everybody, not just ourselves.
And I love the point that you're making about actually including people with disability, but you give amazing examples of a range of other people that can use the same facilities as well, and so including them early on in the process, because as you said, I may potentially, if I was a builder, I may think about, oh yeah, I probably need to put a ramp, but I might not think about the door that is too heavy to be pushed indeed, because it's not something that is stopping me to live my life at that specific point in time. But as you said, there is a range of people actually that that would benefit from it. And when you were sharing that, actually, I remembered actually going in Paris in the subway or in London, and it's a nightmare actually to go with around simply with a stroller, as you said. With probably as well a child that I can put down for a second so I can go down the steps with the stroller and bring them back in. Already it is a challenge. So how do you do it indeed when you have disability?
What a safety. What a safety. You want to put your child down in a subway in New York City, that child would be gone. They would not wait for you to go down the steps and come back. When you came back up the steps, the child would be taken. You better call Liam Neeson to come and help you find the child. But yeah, it's just, and
I'll
it's
keep
safety,
that in mind.
Yeah. I don't know if you really want to call him, but just the safety aspect. You're carrying your child. You don't have, you have to carry the child and the stroller, at the same time. And what a safety issue. What if you fall? What if you fall and you fall on your child, and you injure them and you injure yourself? I mean, some of the things that we have, zero ramps. How many people falling is the largest cause of death? You fall, you have to have some kind of recuperation. And then you usually, after you get out of the hospital, you have to go to a nursing facility where that's where the infection and all the germs can seep in to your already compromised immunity, because you've been weakened. If you break your leg, you've been weakened. So it's not just, that it's not just for me. I'm in a wheelchair, I'll be fine. I won't fall down, going up the ramp or going up brick pavements. The world shifts and the pavement becomes uneven, and it catches, your heel or your toe, and you fall down. You imagine falling down on brick, and so just all these little things that we don't think about. What if you're carrying coffee and you have to open that heavy door? What if somebody's rushing, they push through the door, and the door is so heavy that it slams back on you, and you spill your hot coffee down the front of your entire chest, and you get like third-degree burns. So, mitigating and making things accessible is not only for us to enjoy things, it's about safety, it's about what makes sense. And we just really need to find ways to protect people. People are not paying attention. They don't think about stuff like that. Because I'm a storyteller, I've written your entire metro experience, subway experience. I just wrote that, you went down the steps and left your child, and then somebody took your child, and then this starts this whole dramatic suspense of events of finding the child and the ransom and and kind of written this suspenseful story. But that's because that's how it had to be in my life. When I have a caregiver that comes, and every morning, if they're late, I got to start taking things off my list of things that I have to do. So disability for me has been just a large, everyday, hour by hour logistical planning session in order to live my life. And that's not such a bad thing, because I'm so glad that I have the mind and the ability to make those adjustments as they need to occur. But other people don't always have that. They've never had to really live, with some limitations. So when something does happen, they really take things for granted. You would not believe the entitlement that people who have to use a wheelchair for 6 months can't believe that every store doesn't have automatic doors. I've watched somebody struggle trying to push themselves through. They have a cast on their leg, and they're like, oh my God, why doesn't this have automatic doors? I'm like, oh, you're new here. Welcome to my world, but just the sense of they're just outraged, and so you don't think about things until you need it. And we all need to be thinking ahead. We need to be thinking about things before we need it. And that will bring all of us to the table, because you'll need our ideas, and I need your ideas as an able-bodied person in order to help physically fix things. And you may have experience, that I don't, but including all of us, we'll be sure we make a end result that has, that is mindful of everybody. And the other thing that I'll say is that when you don't do things, you get sued or you have to fix it. And there's so much money and so much waste in fixing something after the fact. Then there could be, usually it's even less. You need less materials, less cement, less things to build something right the first time. And then everybody's got to come back. The architect has to come back. The engineer has to come back. The carpenter person, the handyman, they all have to come back and fix something that they could have made, work for everybody from the get-go in the first place.
Very true. And so you mentioned about obviously the physical environment here, and so many things we can do ahead and think before we actually implement anything. But earlier on, you mentioned a little bit as well about that the mindset barrier. And so how do you approach people who might be that mindset? Sometimes I imagine it's very innocent. They just don't have the awareness. But other times as well is they don't necessarily want to understand fully what are their biases and what are they bringing on the table. So how do you approach that side of that barrier?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to approach it. One is, you have to find something that resonates with people. And a lot of the examples I've been using as far as architecture and physical barriers, if you want to really talk to someone, you can start talking about money and what they care about. As sad as it is, that's all they care about. Some people don't. But money and their own image in how people view them. If those things receive a detriment, or if there's any kind of negativity around their brand, then they will pay attention, because they don't want that. And it's sad. It's sad that we have to threaten and get to the bottom line in order to get people's attention. But those are the things that work. And so I was on, a show the other day talking about how we lack empathy, and so when you lack empathy, you can't see the other person's perspective. And so people have to really look inside themselves and ask if they are empathetic. Do they have it within themselves? And how can they be more mindful of it? So there's emotional, digging into their emotional factors and motivations, and really getting to the human character. And then there's putting themselves in our shoes. Sometimes, we used to do these disability awareness days where we had, wheelchairs that we could use and people could ride around in them. That's really just a snippet, and we don't do a lot of that anymore, because at the end of the day, you're getting out of the wheelchair. This is just a demonstration. You're not permanently disabled, but at least for a moment, you might think about someone else. And like I said, so the money, reaching them on a human connection, and then looking at, what motivates them to do, and how can you bring about change if you look at their motivations. If they thought they're going to lose business, or it's something that they could get bad press about, they'll change. They'll be like, wow, I didn't realize you could, and cancel culture is a really real and terrible thing. I don't condone cancel culture at all, but it has, it has forced people to consider, and to go away for a little while, have some introspection, be hidden from mass public viewing, and change, because they have to really go and reckon with themselves about how they operate, and good or bad. I don't agree with the vitriol and the way we shame people. I don't use that approach at all. I just try to look for a human connection. And a lot of times I've won people over just by being humorous. If I can poke fun at myself, if I can get them to laugh, that really releases any performative nature that they have to kind of act like they're one person when they really aren't. So try to find a connection between people. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all humans, regardless of what makes us up. We're human beings, and we should really try first to relate to each other on some kind of shared interest.
And I love how you phrase it, because it's true that when you look out there, if we talk about diversity and inclusion in the bigger sense of the word, a lot of the things we read out there as individuals is the benefits that, I don't know, organizations will get from being more diverse, being more inclusive, which is great. I think it's important, because obviously we want these organizations to be able to change as well and to do something about it. But ultimately, I think the point you're making is very important, that it needs to go back to the individual and relate back and have that connection with the individual. Otherwise, as individuals, we're never going to change. We're never going to become more inclusive, more diverse in the people around us, and create that sense of belonging. Because ultimately, as an individual, I don't care if my company is making 3 times the profit or whatever the numbers are at the moment in the research. That is not helping me connect to it, because I'm probably not going to get any of that money anyway. So it's great that the company is doing it. But as you said, I think creating that human connection will make the difference in changing the world around us. And I love that you that you put that on the table.
Yeah, it's really important. And you know what? Some companies and some people, money isn't a motivator for them. So, but what they really care about is their community outreach and their ability to say that, at least you would hope, so many companies go through so many hands that it moves further and further away from a family generation company. It's now just a public offering. The family is all dead, and there's just, money grabbing, money hungry people now running the place. But there does need to be hopefully some kind of conscience within that company, some kind of culture. And that's where the community outreach person comes in and says, you want to just make money off the backs of people, or do you want to try to leave a real lasting legacy? How far away have you gotten from that, from being a business, either small or large? You have so much money. Can you do something good? Could you cure cancer? Could you end world hunger? And so that, I think, I will say that, those kind of motivations resonate, I think, with more of the millennials. They could
Mm-hmm.
care less about money because really, we as parents, if we're 40 and 50, we gave them everything they need. So they're looking for more of a connection and leaving a lasting impact than they are about money. So it's going to ebb and flow. The next generation after that may be now focused on money again.
Mm-hmm.
And the people right now are focused on environmental issues, but it's all going to keep going around and around.
Mm-hmm.
One decade it'll be the money, another decade it'll be how can I cure some disease like what I have, like muscular dystrophy. So it will just keep going around, but it's also up to parents to instill, those values.
Yeah.
Like you can't give them, you can't give away if people have suicidal ideologies. You can't throw money at that,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to find something deeper in order to make the person want to stay and find what's really resonating with them.
Mm-hmm.
Give them $1 million. And a lot of people have that problem now. A lot of rich people, are just have so much excess, like
Mm-hmm.
they feel no earthly good. And so they're just like, I don't even know what I'm here for anymore. Let's just end it. And that's really sad. So we're all looking, I think, to connect deeper on deeper levels. And it's not about money for
Mm-hmm.
some people.
No, very true. And one thing I wanted to ask you actually, out of curiosity, I think, and to understand a little bit more, what are some of the impacts of physical disabilities on your psychological state and your mental state? So I wanted to, what I was interested in is understanding, is there an impact, first of all? Are they very much linked to each other? I have maybe some bits of answers in my head, but I think
Yeah.
hearing it from you is going to be a different point of view, I'm sure. And
Yep,
is it
of
a
course.
positive impact? Is it a negative impact? Is it a bit of both? And how do you overcome that as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of both. I mean, some days I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm going to conquer the world. And some days, it's not like that. It's like, wow, the world, no, I can't do anything. So I think it really comes back to how you're raised and how you're brought up.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were, had a lot of faith. My dad was an ordained minister. He's deceased now, but he had a church for over 27 years. And he was a pastor. And so he instilled in me a lot of faith and, belief in God. And so I know that that is what sustains me at the end of the day. But of course, dealing with your disability is a major, psychological heavyweight
Mm-hmm.
in your mind. It constantly weighs on you, at least it does for me. It's something that I think about, but most of the time I am able to rise above it, to move on about my day. And I have a really good attitude, a can do attitude. And I think that that is key. I think that parents that bring up children with disabilities who are kind of like, well, you have a disability, always compensating and always
Mm-hmm.
blaming disability for things when it's really not. It's really shouldn't have that much power. It should be, you have this problem, and these are some of the issues that you're going to face, but your mind and your faith or whatever people have, your mind and a little pep talk are what's going to be able to get you through. And also trying to work through things. I'm only really that depressed when I can't participate in something, or somebody says something mean or negative about me having a disability, or there's a great injustice in the world that I see on the news about somebody maybe thrown off a plane because sometimes you can get removed off a plane because they perceive that you can't assist
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And so they won't, and that has happened lots of times. And it's like, if the plane is going down, it's not going to matter if I can help myself or not. We're
Mm-hmm.
all going to die probably. So disability has no real factor in our ability to survive. So just little things like that. It's things that people say. It's not being able to participate in something. Those things can remind me, wow, you're disabled. But
Mhm.
I just have to sit with that, and I just have to accept that. But I also have to come back and say, you are, but how are you going to make this better the next time you come
Mhm.
up on something like this? And so it's just a constant daily, um, like a little pep talk. Sometimes I wake up, I'm like, wow, I'm disabled again. And, sometimes I ask God, like, are we done here? Like, what's going on? Do you have enough glory? Am I not a wonderful, shining example of everything that you can do in one's life? And he's like, no, I'm not done yet. Keep going. Just really reckoning with your own. And mine is more muscle ability, not being able to do things with my arms and legs and reach stuff. Nothing has impaired my mind. So
Mhm.
my brain is like, we're going to find a way around this. And so, I have systems in place. I have a network of support. Those are the things that really make a difference in your ability to handle your issues.
And you've made two very good points here that I found fascinating. The first one, I think for uh, I think everyone who is around people with disabilities and supporting them
Mhm.
is to remember that there is a hidden side actually to it, which is more psychological, which as you said, sometimes there are good days, sometimes there are bad days, but
Right.
it is important to be present and supportive when those bad days are coming, obviously, because it goes
Mhm.
beyond just the physical disability, I think. So I think that's a very important point, that even though it might look like you're doing fine,
Right.
let's not forget that
Mhm.
actually in the background maybe it's not as simple as an answer. And the second point that
Right.
I love that you made as well is, how do you kind of learn from some of these challenges as well? And that goes very much into some of the work I do around resilience. So I love that you brought it up as well. But what are some of the
Mhm.
lessons that I've learned? How can I do things differently next
Mhm.
time one of these challenges come? And I think that resilience actually shows that you can push forward and you can move and say, okay, yeah, I struggled the first time maybe, but now I know how to,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
can do it differently, and hopefully makes your life and everybody's life easier as well. So I think that second point here about how do I learn from those lessons is a very,
Right.
very good
Right.
point. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure. And people need to really, start documenting, I think. I don't journal, but because I write so many books, that is a form of my journaling. But at the end of the year, I do write what I call reflections, and it's usually in 7 areas of my life. So I have work, I have my publishing and writing career, financial, educational, spiritual, and then relationships, and then health and wellness, recreation and leisure. That might be 8. But I kind of write about, this came upon me, but this is how I handled it. And I
Mhm.
feel like people should document more triumphs, because that's what journaling is really all about, is that you look back over your life and you saw that was so painful, what I went through, but I got out of it. And you will get out of something again. But I think we forget, our memory is only but so much. And so to really document and to think back to a time when things were just so bleak and they looked so
Mhm.
devastating, I've thought about that, and I think more people should kind of document. I was talking with my mom the other day about, I was like, remember that Valentine's Day party I had? I used to be the singles ministry chairperson. So I would plan events just for single people for my church. And it was so wonderful. I had so many pictures and I posted that as a memory on my Facebook page. And I said, remember, mom, you came and helped me set up. And then you and dad went on a little date. They left the hotel while I was having the event. And she's like, oh, I know, that was so wonderful, but I don't even know where we went. And I'm like, you told me you had so much fun. And so just, I was like, that was a missed opportunity to record
Mm-hmm.
when things were going so well. Because when you look back on those things and those times, you'll just like, all of it comes back to you. You get warm, you get the fuzzy feeling, you have a euphoria. And so I think it's important for people who do have, and anybody who even does it, I think all people should do this, but for people who are prone to recurring setbacks and daily needs to pump themselves up, sometimes reading a passage from your life of where you overcame can really motivate you. And so I encourage people to do that because I try to do that every year. I just think about the whole year. I think about the bad things. That is my form of journaling. It's much more easier because I don't have time to write something every single day, but there's also a line a day journals. Those are very popular too, where you just write one line every day. So it's not too involved, it's not too taxing. But we need to look back. And you need really, what I'm trying to say too, is that you need to look back and see where God has brought you. He brought you through those things too. So that's what I think about
Mm-hmm.
when I have tough times.
I love it. And you're right, celebrating and being grateful about the things that have happened to us is very
Mhm.
important. And again, it's part of that building that resilience and allowing us not only um, to overcome setbacks, but also prepare for whatever is going to come next. And as you said, being able
Right.
to opening it back and remembering those times and thinking, well, actually, yeah, I did it. I
I
succeeded there. I
survived.
made that. I
Mhm.
moved forward. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
you talked a few times, and I think as we're coming close to an end of this episode as well, you mentioned about your writing career, and I know that the genre you're writing is maybe not necessarily always very into diversity and equity and inclusion in some of the other work you're doing outside, although I do believe you have a couple of books that talk about the disability and so on.
Yeah.
How did that come to life and to fruition, this whole writing business that I
Mhm.
and you can hear it actually. This episode is brilliant for that. You can hear the
Mhm.
storytelling when you and I
Yeah.
are discussing. Definitely it is
Yes.
there,
Yes.
part of at the heart of your life. So
Mhm.
how did
Mhm.
it come to life?
Well, it really came to life in college. My college years were really difficult, and
Mhm.
I had trouble with math. Math for liberal arts is supposed to be for the artistic set, but it's still math at the end of the day. It's still difficult. And so I just remember kind of zoning out when my math teacher was talking. I would kind of disappear into myself, into my own mind. I would turn my paper over from the math problem, turned it over on the back, and I just started writing a story. And so, and that made me feel better. Writing a story where I could control what was happening to the characters, where I could be kind of like their little God, their little God, and kind of orchestrate their world. That was fun to me. And I could also write happy endings. I would confront, sad endings, bad endings, endings of inaccessibility in my real life. So to disappear into a world where I get to orchestrate what happens and how people do in their own pursuits in their own life was so fun. And it was so liberating, and also living vicariously through my characters, just to escape and just to let something happy occur for them when it didn't always occur for me. So that's really where my writing stemmed from. And I've written 15 books. And the current book that I have now is on disability. And I just wanted to give some anecdotal advice. It's called Disability, an Anecdotal Field Guide for the rest of us. That is covering topics such as employment and recreation, housing, emergency preparedness. I've taken 9 topics and I just write about this is my experience. This is what you can take away from it. And this is how I overcame whatever the issue is I'm talking about. So
Mhm.
it's really just a little advice handbook. It's really short, it's not too long, but if you're going through something as a person with disability or as a parent of a child with special needs with disabilities, you could go to that and say, how did Tracee handle, the roadblocks that she encountered in trying to find a job? And I kind of
Mhm.
cover that. This is what I did. This is what I needed to learn. And so I'm just giving advice on those topics. And I hope to have more volumes with more topics, and also inviting other people with disabilities to contribute to the next volume, because this one I just released says volume 1 on the front. And I really hope there'll be about 5 or 6 volumes when all is said and done to that end. So I'm excited about that.
It is very exciting indeed. And I'm gonna ask you then one last question around that. I'm glad you talked about the book. What would be one advice that you would give to people like me, for example, who maybe don't encounter people with physical disability very often, or might be doing things that are either not appropriate or I'm unaware I should be doing differently? What would be like one advice without spoiling the whole book, because we'll let people go and read more about it, but what would be one thing
Right,
you
right.
you would say, yeah, that's really cool advice that I should share with the
Mhm.
listeners?
Yeah, I just think you have to challenge your own assumptions. Do you limit others by what you think they can do? And how can you go about erasing that, or at least changing it to be more open to human capability, to people with disabilities capability to make it in this world? How can we stop relegating people with disabilities to just being on Social Security, which
Mhm.
still happens a lot? How can we not say, well, you're probably only good for this career because it involves sitting down and you only have to type and you can talk a little bit? Like, how can we think outside the box to encourage people, even though we are so limited by what we think can be done,
Mhm.
and we have no idea the technology that has yet to be discovered, and we have no idea about that person's own determination levels to try to make it. And so, I think that is the first step. Is just recognize. And would you want, to relate it back to the human part of you, is would you want someone to put those limits on your own children?
Mhm.
That's what you really have to think about, because it's hard to think about people you don't know and people you're not related to. But when you think about your own family's development, would you want someone to put them in these types of boxes? And what do you think about your own children? Some people
Mhm.
are like, well, Johnny's kind of little, he's on the little side, he's kind of short, he's not that smart. We'll just be happy if he why does it have to be so limiting? We'll just be happy if he what does the bare minimum in life and finds a nice wife. Like that's so terrible for little Johnny. He has more potential than you can ever imagine.
Thank you so much for sharing this advice. I think it's a
Yes,
it's a
you're
beautiful
welcome.
way to close this episode, although I do have one last question, which is
Okay.
simply, it's more of a logistical question here. If people want to reach out to you, they want to learn more about what you're doing, maybe even look at the book and purchase it.
Yeah,
What's the best way for them to do that?
sure. The best way is to go to my website at traceegarner.com. That's Tracee, Tracee, Garner, Garner.com. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So they can reach out to me through my website or just, social media.
Mhm. Brilliant. And I'll definitely put all these links as well in the notes of the episode. So if anyone wants to click on the links so it's easier, they're definitely more than welcome to do so. Tracee, thank you so much for having
Thank
been
you,
part of
Julian.
this episode and this journey as well. I
Mhm.
love everything you're doing, so keep going.
I
And
will.
thank you so much for sharing those words of wisdom. And I hope
You too.
I'll have you again on this podcast in
Yes.
the near future.
You too. Thank you. And have a wonderful day, and your listeners too.
Thank you. You too. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. We'd love to hear from you. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.